All right, so you're probably wondering why I'm laying inside of this tire. Anyway, it's actually I'm laying here because it sounds really really cool. It's like an echo chamber in here, um, and it just that's really not why I'm in here. So hey, have you ever wondered what all these numbers and letters and indicators and all this stuff on the outside of the tire means? Well, that's why I'm here today, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's get started. All right, so I got myself out from underneath the tire, and now we're going to learn about some of the wording and some of the numbers on the side of this tire. So out here in the yard today, it's a beautiful day. I had to take the hoodie off. It's absolutely beautiful out here. My neighbors are over there cutting a tree down. My dogs are barking at my other neighbors. So hopefully we can get through this video without too many distractions. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the manufacturer of a tire. So this tire, the manufacturer is Nexen. So you might not be too familiar with the manufacturer Nexen. You might be more familiar with a Bridgestone or Goodyear, Michelin, Pirelli, Firestone. Those are some of the more popular brands, but the brand of this tire is a Nexen. So, and next thing we're going to talk about is the model of the tire. The model of this tire is a CP641. You should be able to see that right here. So hopefully I'm close enough you can see all these numbers pretty well. All right, so if you were going to call a tire shop and you're going to order a tire, you want to order this particular tire, you'd be ordering a Nexen CP641. Now, of course, there's going to be other numbers you're going to have to give them. You're going to have to tell them the size and speed rating and load rating and all that kind of stuff, but we're going to talk about that in just a minute. All right, and that's where we're going to get to. The next thing on this tire, now that we've talked about the manufacturer and the model, we're going to talk about the type of tire. So you're looking at the tire and you're like, what do you mean type? This is rubber. It's just a rubber tire. That's what type it is, right? So yeah, I mean, it's rubber, but there's actually a little bit more to it than that. So maybe on some tires, right here before the 215, you're going to see a letter or two letters, right? You might see a P, an LT, an ST, or a T here, and it'll be like P215 or LT215. So we want to talk about what that letter might mean. Now, if you don't see any letter here, right, you don't see anything here, most of the time it's going to be a passenger tire. It's going to have that P designation, even if it doesn't have the P right there. But you'll have to go off of the size, the load index, and you're going to have to go off the speed rating. You have to figure out if that's the right tire for your vehicle. You know, anywhere you order tires from, they should know that, right? So what we're going to talk about is those letters that would be there and what they mean. So a P, if you saw a P right here, P215, that would mean that that tire is intended for passenger cars. So, or it could, some of them have a P as P metric, right? So that's what the P would mean. And then if you see the LT right here, that would mean light truck. So the tire was intended to go on a light truck. If you see ST right here, that would mean that the tire is a special tire. And what we mean by, you know, special, it's not like it's really some kind of like awesome tire or something. All it means is that the tire was made for a special purpose, like a camper, a trailer, some sort of utility vehicle, something like that. It had a special purpose that it was made for. So and it should be used only for that special purpose, right? So that would be ST. And you may also see a T right there. So a T215, and so on, so on, so on. So the T, what that means is temporary, so temporary spare. Okay, so that tire would be only suitable for use as a temporary spare tire. You know, back in the day, spare tires used to be the same size as all other tires on the car. So if you got a flat tire, you could just simply change out the spare tire, put the spare tire on, put your flat back in the trunk, and just go about your way. Not really have to worry about anything and drive the car as you normally would. But nowadays, most tires are either going to be a smaller size, they're not going to be able to be driven as fast, they won't wear as well. So then those are what's called temporary spare. They may also be known as a donut spare. That's going to be a temporary as well. You may have heard the term, I got a donut spare. But that's a temporary spare. So if you have that T there, you have to be really careful on what, how far you can drive the car, how fast you can drive the car, because those tires, many times, if it has a T, you can't drive over a certain miles an hour, like 60 miles an hour or even less. But they're only intended to be driven for, short distances. They're not intended to be on the car all the time. Okay, so that's what would be that T and that temporary spare. Now let's get into some of the numbers here, and it can all be quite confusing if you don't know what they mean, but we'll try to make it simple for you and walk you through this slowly. So the 215, that means 215 millimeters. If it was a 300 right here, that would mean 300 millimeters. And what we're talking about with the 215 on this tire or the 300 on another tire would be the section width. So we're talking about the width of the tread. How wide is the tread? Right, so this tread from here to here, the tread width or section width or width is 215 millimeters. And obviously if it was 300 millimeters, it would be bigger than this. So it would be wider than this tire right here, okay? Hopefully that's pretty clear. So now that we've talked about the width, right? So 215 is the width of this one, 215 millimeters, all right? Now, the next number here I'm going to talk about is what's called the aspect ratio. This number there's a lot of misconceptions about this number. Many people think that the 60 means the size of the sidewall. It does. However, it's not actually the size of the sidewall. It's a percentage of the tire section width, okay? So many people think just be all the tires that have a 60 here as the aspect ratio, all the sidewalls are the same size. This is not correct. So the way this works is, if you think about the size of the sidewall, the height of the sidewall, I was looking at the height of this sidewall is 60% of the section width. So 60% of 215. And if you do the math, and the way you would do the math there is just take 215 multiply by 0.6, and what you would get is 129 millimeters on the sidewall height, okay? So now let's say if this tire was 300 millimeters. So say this was a 360 tire. So then what we would do is we would take 300 multiplied by 0.6, and then we would get the sidewall size of 180 millimeters. So you could see where at 215 millimeters with a 60 aspect ratio, our sidewall would be 129 millimeters. If we had a 300 section width and a 60 aspect ratio, our sidewall would then be 180 millimeters. So you'll see where the number 60 will be on both tires, but the sidewall would then be different for both tires, and it's all based on that first number because it's a relationship between those, between that first number, 60% of 215. If it was a 50, it would be 50% of 215. If it was a 45, it would be 45% of 215. And you always do the math the same. You go 215 times 0.6 or 0.5 or 0.45, depending on what that aspect ratio was. I hope that clears up, I hope I make that easy for you to understand and clears up maybe some misconceptions you may have had about that. All right, so the next thing we're going to get to is the R. And you can see that over here as well, 215R16. Might be a little clearer here over here, but I'm going off of this numbers because we have these other numbers too that I'd like to talk about. So this R is what is a radial, means radial. And this is the most popular type of tire that's on the road. And another letter you might see here would be a D, and that would stand for diagonal. And then you also have another letter that you might see, and that's going to be B. So you're not really going to see those very much out on the road. Mostly you're going to see is the R. All right, and then the 16. So the 16 is actually the width of the rim that you're going to install this tire on. So if I take a tape measure here and we measure this part of the tire where the rim would be, the wheel would go right here, and this would mount onto the wheel. You can see on the tape measure that it's 16 inches, right? So that is the inner portion of the tire here where the wheel would mount on. And it's very, very important that you have the correct wheel, the 16-inch wheel to mount this 16-inch tire on, because it will not, you try to put this wheel on a 17-inch tire, you're going to rip the tire or it's just not going to work out very well. And if you try to put it on a 15-inch rim, and try to put this 16-inch tire on a 15-inch rim, it's just going to flop around. It's not going to hold air. It's not going to, it's not going to stay on there. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about here is the load index. And I got my two helpers here. You can't see them, but they're right behind me. So the next thing we want to talk about here is the load index. And the load index on this tire is 95. And what that means is a load index of 95 means this tire is capable of handling 1,521 pounds. So 1,521 pounds is what the 95 load index rating means. So if this load rating index was less, the tire would be able to handle less weight. If it was higher, the tire would be able to handle more weight, okay? And the next thing I want to talk about is this H. And this H is the speed rating. And the speed rating is the fastest speed the tire can handle before it may no longer perform as it's designed, right? So, and the H rating is actually 130 miles an hour. So at 130 miles an hour, this manufacturer says, okay, well, this tire is good up to 130 miles an hour. But once they hit that 130 miles an hour, if this tire, may not perform as they intended it to perform, it may fly apart, it may start overheating, whatever. It just may not perform as it was intended. Okay, so that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you learned quite a bit. I hope I cleared up some misconceptions for you, and yeah, just keep watching the rest of the videos that I make, and hopefully they're informative and you can learn from them. So I hope everyone has a great day, and I'm out. Me and my two helpers and Mr. Chainsaw in the background, we're all out of here. Have a good one. Bye-bye.